And welcome to the last installment this week for Parshat Mishpatim, as we move on to Parshat Truma for next week. And Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Yes, and here is the share. So, you know that I struggle. You know that I struggle. And my struggle is between Torah Tamima and moving on the text itself with Mishpatim. And this time I decided I needed to do a little bit more with the Rashi. That is the title of the class, and I probably need to be honest to it. So, new paragraph. This is all, by the way, this is all dealing with tragic circumstances, and how do you deal with them? And I don't know if we're going to get through everything in this little section, which is sad, but because how it ends is so interesting and really, I think, beautiful. However, this is what it is. And if in a situation, if a yimkor is to sell, right, to sell, ish. If a man sells et bito la'ama, his daughter as a maidservant, right? So we are now talking about someone who is in desperate straits financially, and this is about all he's left to do, right? He's got nothing else to do. Possibly the circumstance, I imagine you can think for yourselves what might, as opposed to selling himself, that he has a large family, or he just isn't in a position to do that. Lo, he might not be well, he may be ill. Lo tetzeh, she shall not go out, ketzet ha'avadim, like the other servants, other slaves that we're talking about. You gotta hold tight. I'm going to keep going without the Rashi for a moment, just to give you the context. Im ra'a be'enei adoneha. So literally it means if she does not find favor in the eyes of her master. Asher lo ya'adea vehefta. So you notice there's a kativ and a kri here. Look at that, right? Lo means not, and lo means to him. So we're to read it, even though they sound pretty much exactly the same, we understand it to mean in that he designated her. In other words, he was planning on ultimately making her his wife. Vehefta, he shall have her redeemed. He must redeem her. So this is sort of already muddying the waters in terms of how do you define this statement back here when it said she shall not go out like slaves go out. So here are the circumstances. The Torah is going on to explain what it means. So the situation that it's implying is that when the father sold her, his daughter, as this slave to this man, right? He sold her for money. He was paid. The father was paid, and the understanding was that this man was going to make her ultimately his wife. Okay. So if he doesn't do that, so this is the law, right? In other words, the meaning of the Torah could make sense this way as well. But what this word is saying is that the intent was always that she should become his wife. And if he's not going to love her, okay, if he's not going to love her, then he needs to have her redeemed. Okay. But if he loves her, she can become his wife. Okay. Um, but what about this law here? And it means in the sense that he did not designate her. In other words, she did not find favor in his eyes. He didn't fall in love with her, and in that sense, he did not. There's the law, designate her. Okay, must make sure she's redeemed. Please just notice in passing all this Rashi that we have on it and all the tons of Torah Tamima. Okay. All right. Here we go. La'am nochi lo yimshol. He has no right, he has no power, no jurisdiction, okay, to sell her to an outsider. An outsider. Bevigdo, because he broke faith. See, there was an understanding that he was going to marry her. He broke, I just was playing around with this particular thought because jilting is a terrible thing, okay? In that he broke faith. And by the way, livgod means basically to act as a traitor. That's the connotation of it, in that he broke faith with her. Now here goes on. Ve'im livno hi adena. However, if he would like to designate her to his son, kemishpat habanot ye'asela, she shall be treated like any other. Banot means daughters. In other words, daughters of Israel. She should be treated like any other daughter of Israel. And here we go. Imacheret, if he or his son, right? Yikach lo, if he takes another wife, she'era, her clothing, her food, ksuta, her clothing, the onata, and her conjugal rights, lo yigra, he shall not diminish. So it's understood that when a woman is married, she is entitled, she has rights, okay? Rights to being, now we understand the whole issue of the rag trade, right? Her clothing, this is the clothing. This is the food. He needs to provide her, with satisfactory food, with clothing, and with her conjugal rights. So it falls on this is so interesting for people who don't know this, that generally I think the American culture, although it may have changed, it may be changing, I don't know, was that sort of the man has the conjugal rights issue and that it's not the woman, all right? But in Jewish law, it's the other way around. The man has to satisfy his wife. That's what this is saying. V'im shalosh ele lo yasela, right? And if he doesn't do these three, this is ambiguous. And I will just tell you as much is that it's not referring to this, okay? This is one of the things, okay? It has to do with the other two categories. We'll perhaps get to it today. I don't know. Lo yasela, and if he doesn't do that, v'yatzah chinam ein kasef. She should go out. She should be able to leave without payment. Remember, he, quote, bought her. He acquired her. All right. I'm going to pause just for a minute in case there are any burning questions right now before I going to try to dig into the Rashi, if this will allow me to move the page down, which it's not doing right now. Does anybody have anything they want to say? I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm going to be able to do here. It's not moving down. Let's try this. There we go. Any comments? No comments?
No comments.
Okay. No angry comments?
Oh, I had a comment.
Yes.
How much of this is about stud services and how much is about pleasure, do you think?
It's not about stud services. It's a whole, no. It's not, I don't get the feeling that it's about that. It's about, I think it's about allowing her to come under his protection, but at the same time, she has responsibilities. Now, what's going to happen is, let's keep going here. I seem to be able to, for some reason, oh, there we go. It's doing it again now. Sorry, have to catch the place. We are talking about a minor. We are talking about a girl who is less than 12 and a half. And she has the option of, obviously, her circumstances are such, is that the father cannot support the family. He has no means of support. And this is giving him an alternative. Okay, so here we go. Here's the Rashi down here. V'chiyim kor. And if a man sells ish et bitola ama, his daughter as a maidservant, and these are the sources here. Piktana hakatuv medaber. So he jumps right into telling us that this is talking strictly about a minor girl. She is less than 12. She's younger than 12 years old. You cannot have, once a girl reaches the age of 12, a father cannot marry her off, okay? Unless she consents. She has to consent to the marriage. So this only applies. A man cannot do this to his daughter that's older than 12 years old. That's how they define a katana, a minor girl. Boys, as you know, become, quote, adults, quote, at 13. Girls mature earlier. And now there's an argument, right? Yachol afilu hevia simanim. Perhaps if she shows signs of puberty. Okay, so in other words, if she's younger than 12 and shows signs of puberty, can the father still sell her into servitude? That's what we're asking, okay? That's the simanim. Simanim are signs, but it's a way of talking about puberty. Amarta kal vachomer. You can argue against that. In other words, the issue is this, if she in fact shows signs of puberty and she's younger than 12, he can't do it either. He's not allowed to do it. This circumstance, generally we're talking because the signs of puberty start at 12, but if they happen to start earlier, we know these things can happen. He cannot sell her. Okay, so you can say a kal vachomer. You can argue from a minor to a major. Uma mechura kodem lechein. And in a situation where she's legitimately sold as a maidservant, in this circumstance, yotz'a b'simanim, one of the three ways that she is released is if she shows signs of puberty. So since when she shows signs of puberty, she's already released, right? And how do we know this? Kamoshe katuv v'yatzah chinam ein kasef, because it says she shall go out for nothing. This was the last little verse that we read this morning. Ein kasef, without payment, right? She'anu dorshim, which we understand as that phrase as meaning l'simanei na'arut. It's referring to a situation where she shows signs of puberty. She'ena mechura. Okay, so this is if she's sold and she goes out when she shows signs of puberty. This is the minor situation. The major situation is she'ena mechura. If she hasn't been sold yet, she wasn't even sold. Eino din shelo timaker. Isn't it logical to say for sure she can't be sold? She has to go out if she's sold. So we're actually going from a major to a minor situation. So that's how we know. So it isn't just a question of age, it's also a question of maturity. Here we go. Lo tetzei, she shall not go out ketzeit ha'avadim, as other slaves are released. We talked about it, and if we actually haven't finished talking about it, the Torah is going to talk about circumstances where a slave is released. Okay, Ketziat, we're talking here about Avadim Kna'anim. We're talking about, not about the Hebrew servant that we talked about before, but we're talking about what are determined as Canaanite servants. Sheyotzim b'shein v'ayin. So you're learning now that if a Canaanite slave, this is a non-Jewish slave, right? It loses a tooth or his eye. In other words, if he's injured, if the slave is injured, okay, he is to be released, period. Interesting, right? A lot to think about there. Aval zo, but this one, lo tetzei b'shein v'ayin, that's not the way this person is released. This girl is not released because on account of an injury, ella, but rather ovedet sheish, she also either works for 6 years, or ad hayovel, or until the Jubilee year. In other words, it's like a Jewish slave, right? Or servant, if we're going to say that's really what it is. Or ad shitavi simanim, or until she shows signs of puberty. V'chol hakodem kodem, and whichever one comes first, comes first. She's released. Lecheruta, for her release. V'noten la demei eina, and he has to give her, he has to compensate her the compensation if she injured her eye, or demei shina, or he has to pay her compensation for the tooth she lost. Or a noella. So that's a difference, right? The Canaanite slave is released. He isn't given compensation financially. He wins his release that way. That's, of course, another subject entirely, right? But in the case of this girl, they go to court and they fix the damages, right? And we know those can be pretty high. O eina ela lo tetse ketseta avadim. Okay. So again, this is trying to rigorously analyze this text. Maybe, so again, it's giving you the solution, but then it's arguing, right? To say, well, maybe that's not right, okay? Maybe this lo tetse ketseta avadim, when the Torah says, because obviously it's ambiguous, right? When it says that she shall not go out like slaves, maybe it means like Hebrew slaves, that she shouldn't go out at 6 years or the Jubilee year. Talmud Lomar, however, we have a scriptural text that says, Ki yimkor, or it's probably Ki yimaker lacha achicha evri. It says, when your brother, the Hebrew, is sold to you, or ha'ivriya, or the Hebrew woman, not just the man, but a woman who is sold into, a Jewish woman who's sold into slavery. Makish ivriya le'ivri. It connects a woman, the woman servant, le'ivri, to the Jewish male servant, the Jewish handmaid to the Jewish slave. L'chol yitziotav, with regards to all the circumstances by which he is emancipated. Ma ivri yotze b'sheish uveyovel, just as a male slave goes out, it's in the 6th year or the Jubilee year, af ivriya yotza b'sheish uveyovel. So a Jewish maidservant goes out, is released in the 6th year, or in other words, after 6 years, or in the Jubilee year. Umahu lo tetse ketseta avadim. So what does it mean when it says she should not go out like the slaves? Lo tetse berashe everim. It means she should not go out by means of limbs, as avadim knaanim, as Canaanite slaves. Still, we're pushing hard here. Yachol ha'ivri yotze berashe avarim. Maybe we should also say that the Israelite slave goes out if he loses an eye or loses a tooth or has his leg broken or whatever it is. Talmud Lomar, scripture teaches ha'ivri or ha'ivriya. It says the Hebrew slave or the Hebrew maidservant. Makish-i ivri le'ivriya. And so it connects, just like in the same way again, the male slave to the woman, okay, maha evriya eno yotza berashe everim, just as the woman does not go out if she loses a tooth or, as an injury, if she's injured. Afhu eno yotze berashe everim. He too is not released. He is given, as you know, compensation, financial compensation. You can see how we're just getting into this stuff. It's 7:56 here. Any comments? Silence. Gee.
I
No.
got one, but I couldn't unmute.
Okay.
So the compensation, okay, so he's compensated, but he's also still being taken care of. He still
Correct.
has a place to live,
Correct. He still
Right.
still is a servant. He's still a servant.
but he still has a roof over his head and food
Correct.
on his table.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
which
Now,
is different than tossing the Canaanite slave out with some cash.
well, you can look at it differently. Okay, he's not getting cash. The Canaanite slave
Oh, no,
isn't getting
that's
cash.
right.
The
Oh, he doesn't get cash at all. It's like,
no,
instead
no,
of, tossing him out on the streets.
right.
So
But
that's compassion.
okay, it's not okay. And again, please, with a Canaanite slave, the fact that he's not a slave anymore is a big thing, right?
Yeah,
He
no, I get that. Yeah,
he can try and get a job. He can try and work as a farm laborer. Whatever. I mean, the nature of their economy.
yeah.
What is part of what is fascinating to me is how progressive this kind of, I mean, and again, we understand, I'm sure you do, that again, even though this goes into quite a bit of detail, it's nowhere close to the amount of detail and the circumstances that one would have to, to actually be able to legislate on the basis of this. One would have to go into far more detail, which it does. I mean, again, Torah Temima is just one little piece of going into far more detail and looking at other things. Okay. All right. It's tempting to do a little bit more. But I won't if there are any other comments. All right. Lauren, do you have any thoughts?
No.
Okay. Can I ask how this
Oh,
makes you
wait a
feel?
minute. I have one other little thing.
Go for it,
At
Gold.
10, at verse 10,
Yes.
it's really a change from verse 9 as to what we're dealing with.
I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, well, all right. Let me see, because I was reading it and I go, if he designated her for a son, he shall deal with her as a
Yes,
practice with
yes,
free maidens.
yes.
Blank. Okay, and if he marries another, he must not withhold. So either one of them marrying another, he or his son.
Correct.
Okay, but it's like it's a second wife. It's still that you're still the
Correct.
wife to that person. Okay,
That's correct. Look,
Right.
polygamy was practiced back
oh no, I have no
Yeah.
problem with that.
Yeah,
I understand that.
right.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be understood there. Yes, but go ahead. So tell me.
Right. So we're dealing with the married woman who, yes, of course he should not do that. We know that
Who,
he should
by
not
the way,
withhold something from her, because we learned that with Jacob and Leah and Rachel.
well, not directly, but yes, of course. In that particular case, we have the story about Rachel, so to speak, purchasing her conjugal rights, because after all, it was Leah's turn. And
Yeah. Right.
yes, exactly.
Right.
Let me think about, there was another little point. Oh, yeah. I mean, part of, I think, what I see happening is we're looking at extremely adverse circumstances, extreme circumstances, and we're trying to grapple with it and try to, how does one handle these extreme circumstances, given the realities of society, and the issue to me is that this little girl is to be treated respectfully, and to feel that she has a future,
Mhm.
and isn't treated like a chattel. He has no right to treat her like a thing.
No, he's taking her into his family.
Correct.
Yes.
And that, and given, and the reason why they're saying the verse, at least to my way of thinking, the reason why we have this verse that says, if he takes another wife, he should not in any way treat her, that should not prejudice him against her. She should
Right.
not be treated with prejudice. Despite the fact that the way she entered this relationship was extremely humble. I mean, it was extreme. And he doesn't have a right to abuse her in any way.
just, it is after 10. You do have a lot of extra stuff to do in the
Oh, yeah, it's Rosh
Union Day.
Chodesh.
I know. I'll stop the recording.
Thank you for indulging me.
Absolutely, no problem. Let's stop the share, and I'm stopping the recording.